thought Liz.
Could you ease up a trifle on the wind effects? Where's the cast?
Yes, I can. And the cast is now entering Center Door Fancy. You know, I never read that Happy Prince until rehearsal. Never even knew it was a Christmas story.
It is now, thanks to our eminent writer, producer, director, Mrs. Alberta Johnson. Next, she'll be making a Christmas story out of Cleopatra.
Cleopatra was hosting Caesar and Mark Antony long before the baby's birth in Bethlehem.
That's what I mean.
Look here, Wyatt's story takes place in the winter, so why not add a few Christmas touches?
Why not indeed? Especially since it enhances my part.
A typical actor's philosophy.
Me? A typical actor?
Besides, in Wyatt's version, a statue talks to a swallow. And the swallow replies. So, anything's possible. To quote the script, through a child's window of imagination, especially just before Christmas. By the way, little swallow, even though you're a swallow, please no tweet in your voice.
Don't tweet. What about the statue? Can I talk like a statue, all right?
If I wanted a better talking statue, I'd have gotten a better actor.
Now there's a good Christmas spirit.
Speaking of spirit, people, let's give it all we've got. The spirit of Christmas past, present, and future. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages. Welcome to the Northwoods Theater of the Air. Tonight's broadcast is a Christmas adaptation of Oscar Wilde's classic story, The Happy Prince. For just a moment or two, close your eyes, and no matter what your age, listen with a child's window of imagination. You too may cross into that time and place where everything is new, and yet familiar. A wondrous city where anything can happen, especially just before Christmas. And now, open your eyes as the gates of the city open and bid you enter. This is where and how something wondrous did happen. High above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. He was very much admired, indeed.
He is as beautiful as a weathercock,
remarked Mayor Mummer, who wished to preserve a reputation for having artistic tastes.
but then again, not quite as useful.
Mayor Mummer added, fearing lest people should think him unpractical.
Why can't you be like the Happy Prince?
Asked a mother of a little boy who was crying for the moon.
The Happy Prince never dreams of crying for anything.
I'm glad there's someone in this world who's quite happy.
Muttered a disappointed man as he gazed at the wonderful statue.
He looks like an angel.
Just like an angel,
said the charity children as they came out of the church in their scarlet cloaks and white pinafores.
How would you know?
Asked the mathematical master.
You have never seen one?
Ah, but we have.
Answered the charity children.
In our dreams.
And the mathematical master frowned and looked very severe, for he did not approve of children dreaming. And so, it was one night there flew over the city a little swallow. Her friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but she had stayed behind, for she was in love with the most handsome red sparrow. She had met him early in the spring as he was flying down the river after a big yellow moth, and had been so attracted to the little swallow and her slender waist that he had stopped to talk to her.
Shall I love you?
Said the red sparrow, who liked to come to the point at once. And the red sparrow made a low bow. He flew round and round her, touching the water with his wings and making silver ripples. This was his courtship, and it lasted all throughout the summer.
This is a ridiculous attachment.
Twittered a wise old swallow.
He has no money, and he has far too many other relations. He is vain and irresolute.
Then, when the autumn came, the wise old swallow and all the others flew away. It was not long after when the little swallow realized that what the wise old swallow had said was true.
Will you come away with me to Egypt?
The little swallow finally asked. But the red sparrow, tired of his lady love, shook his imperious head and feathers.
You have been trifling with me?
The little swallow cried.
I am off to the pyramids. Goodbye.
All day long she flew, and at nighttime she arrived at the city. Then she saw the statue.
I will put up there,
she declared, and alighted between the feet of the happy prince.
It is a fine position. I have a golden bedroom with plenty of fresh air.
But just as she was putting her head under her wing, preparing to go to sleep, a large drop of water fell on her, and she remarked,
What a curious thing! There is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright. And yet, it is raining? The climate in the north of Europe is really dreadful.
Then a third drop fell.
What is the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off? I must look for a good chimney pot.
But before she had opened her wings to fly away, a fourth drop fell, and she looked up and saw, what did she see? The eyes of the happy prince were filled with tears, and tears were running down his golden cheeks. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow was filled with pity.
Who are you?
The little swallow asked.
I am the happy prince.
Why are you weeping then? You have quite drenched me.
When I was alive and had a human heart, I did not know what tears were. My courtiers called me the happy prince, and happy indeed I was, for I could contribute to the well-being and happiness of those around me. And now that I am dead, they have set me up here so high that I can see all the ugliness and all the misery that has befallen my city. And though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep.
What?
The little swallow whispered to herself. She was too polite to make any personal remarks out loud.
Is he not solid gold?
And then the little swallow addressed the unhappy, happy prince.
I came here during the night and could not see what ugliness and misery you speak of that has befallen your city? What did you do when you were alive, and how has the city changed since then?
Modest, though, was the happy prince. His leaden heart was too full not to relate to the little swallow the tale of his tears. He did so while trying all along to diminish his own accomplishments during what had come about while he ruled the city.
Years ago, the city thrived. A breakwater was constructed to provide calmer access for vessels laden with cargo, for fishing boats rowing in and out of the curving harbor. A hospital was established to tend to the city's sick. A hospital with the best doctors, the latest medicine, and the finest equipment.
Without him, all this would not have been done.
It was all because of him.
It's only proper that we do it.
Unanimously, the town council wanted to name the statue after the happy prince, but he would not allow it. He was that humble and unpretentious.
Farmers tended their fertile fields and transported wheat, potatoes, corn and barley, meat and hides and purchased seed, plows, calicos, and crockery from the city's tradesmen. And at Christmas time, echoing from the church, the houses, the streets, songs of the season.
Everything you speak of,
Said the little swallow in a puzzled voice.
seems to be cause for rejoicing, certainly not a cause for sorrow. Then, why the tears?
Because that was then. But during the years following my death, things have changed. Changed for the worse. Much worse.
How have things changed?
The citizens have become complacent, lax, and lazy.
But they did build this splendid statue with precious stones in appreciation for all you've done.
I would never have allowed it if I were alive at that time. But hardly anyone ever comes by this section of the city anymore. And of what good are these adornments? Whom do they benefit?
During this exchange between the happy prince and the little swallow in the middle of the night, a young man had come by and sat on a nearby bench listening to what was said. This was Ethan Blaine, the minister of the city's poverty-stricken church, with fewer and fewer parishioners. He could not sleep because of an inner conflict. He had been offered a prosperous parish with a beautiful cathedral in another city. He listened as the conversation continued and the little swallow spoke.
I am sorry for your plight and for the city. I wish that there was something I could do to help.
Ah, but there is, little swallow. There is something you can do.
Then tell me what that something is, for soon I am on my way to Egypt and a warmer climate.
Little swallow, will you not stay and be my messenger?
Me? A messenger? What could just a swallow do?
What I, a statue, cannot do. In the center of the city, a weary doctor, Adam Rees, the only doctor left, with just one nurse, Edwina, to minister to his patients, is trying to summon his fading strength to do what he can without enough medicine and equipment to fight all the sickness that has struck the city. He cannot survive much longer, nor can his patients. Not without our help.
Our help? What would you have me do?
Little swallow, will you not bring to the hospital the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal, and I cannot move.
But I am waited for in Egypt. My friends are flying up and down the Nile and talking to the large lotus flowers.
Little swallow, will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? So many lives can be touched.
The happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry.
It is very cold here, but I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger.
Thank you, little swallow.
So the swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in her beak over the roofs of the city. Ethan Blaine, the minister, still with a great dilemma, rose from the bench, gazed at the happy prince, who now seemed to be smiling, and spoke to himself and to the night.
I believe I may have witnessed a miracle.
Then the minister went home to his wife, Madeline, who had earlier implored him to refuse the offer from the prosperous cathedral in another city, to stay and help rebuild his destitute parish.
Ethan, I was so worried. You said you would walk through the city and make up your mind. What have you decided?
One thing I didn't have to decide. I knew that this was going to be a bleak Christmas. But what about the Christmases to come? I wanted to do what is best for you and me and for the baby that's coming soon. We've little money and few parishioners. I have been thinking of how much better off we would be. Is that so selfish?
Is that why you became a minister?
Of course not, but
what, Ethan?
now I wonder, what or who guided my footsteps to the statue of the Happy Prince?
The little swallow passed over the moonlit harbor. At last, the little swallow came in sight of what was once a sanctuary for the sick, and now a place where the feverish patients lay, with the specter of death waiting to carry them away. Where a lone, weary Dr. Reese and his loyal nurse Edwina labored through the torturous days and nights. The little swallow circled the hospital, spied an open window, silently hopped in, and, unseen by the sleepless doctor and nurse, lay the great ruby on a table, then waited on the windowsill.
Doctor, you've been up 2 days and nights. You can't go on like this.
Neither can the patients.
But you, yourself, have become more patient than doctor. You've got to preserve what strength you have left, and you grow weaker every day, every hour.
Then I must make the most of the time that I have left.
But doctor, you...
The nurse had noticed the great ruby sparkling on the nearby table.
What is it, nurse? What's the matter?
I don't know how it got there, but look, on the table, a precious ruby.
The doctor reached and took the ruby into the palm of his trembling hand.
A ruby? No, it's more than that. It's much more. It's medicine, beds, equipment, and staff, doctors and nurses to help the two of us, to help us save the lives of hundreds who will go on living, cure of their sickness. That is what I hold in my hand.
The little swallow listened to the words of the doctor, then flew back to the happy prince and told him what had happened.
It's curious,
She remarked.
but I feel quite warm now, although it is quite cold.
That is because you have done a good action.
And the little swallow began to think. Then she fell asleep. Thinking always made her sleepy. The next day, the little swallow flew down to the harbor. She sat on the highest mast of the lone vessel and contemplated the joyous journey she would soon begin. Her pointed wings fluttered in the breeze.
A favorable wind! A perfect wind will carry me
And when the moon rose, she flew back to the statue of the happy prince.
I am come to bid you goodbye,
she cried, her heart overflowing with joy for the good deeds she had accomplished, and with the comforting prospect of the warm climate of Egypt.
Little swallow, will you not stay with me one night longer?
It is already winter,
answered the swallow,
and the chill snow will soon be here. In Egypt, the sun is warm on the green palm trees, and the crocodiles lie in the mud and look lazily about them.
Just one night longer,
repeated the happy prince.
I must leave you now, but I will never forget you. And next spring, I will bring you back a beautiful jewel in place of that which you have given away. The ruby shall be redder than a red rose.
in the square below,
said the happy prince.
an elderly lady is preparing to say her prayers at bedtime. Miss Fetzer is the teacher of the city school. This gray-haired woman, her eyes magnified by a set of thick glasses, peers out of a pale, wrinkled face. Her entire life has been dedicated to her profession, and while during the day she puts on a brave front with the children, Miss Fetzer has become more discouraged every day. Earlier today, she spoke these words to the children in the bleak classroom. Many of those students were shivering from the cold whistling through the broken windows and patched-up ceiling.
Boys and girls, I know that some of you are hungry and you're all cold, but there's little wood for the stove, and we must conserve. Conserve. For you little ones, that means save. We must conserve it for the even colder days that are approaching this winter, along with Christmas. Tomorrow, wear the heaviest garments, sweaters, and coats in the closet, your brothers and sisters, if they can spare them. Some of your books are worn and torn, pages missing. We hope that one day soon we may have new books for each of you. Go home, try to keep warm, to nourish your strength, and I will do everything possible to help you learn the lessons you need, to help you seek a better, more enhanced life. And since Christmas is near, I wish I had a gift for each of you. I have not, but I will pray for the Lord to provide.
For the betterment of those children, I ask you to pluck out my eyes and give them to that teacher.
I will stay with you for one night longer, but I cannot pluck out your eyes. You would be quite blind then.
Little swallow, please do as I ask.
So the little swallow plucked out the prince's eyes and darted down with them. Her eyes, closed in prayer, with her spectacles lying on a pillow, the teacher knelt at the side of the bed.
This I ask, O Lord, on behalf of those children in need of your divine mercy.
At that moment, Miss Fetzer felt a drop of something nearby on the bed. She opened her eyes, reached for her glasses on the pillow, and placed them on her wizened face. Her eyes gazed upon the glittering sapphires, that lifted upwards as she smiled and whispered,
Thank you, O Lord, for this thy gift.
Then the swallow came back to the prince. She was pleased with what she had done, but at the same time saddened as she looked upon what had become of him.
You are blind now, so I will stay with you always.
No, little swallow, you must go away to Egypt.
I will stay with you always.
And she folded her wings for warmth and slept at the prince's feet. All the next day, the little swallow sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what she had seen in strange lands.
And there kneels the Sphinx, who is as old as the world itself, and lives in the desert and knows everything. There reigns the king of the mountains and the moon, who worships a large crystal. A great green snake sleeps in a palm tree. Has 20 priests to feed it with honey cakes.
Dear little swallow, you tell me of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. There is no mystery as great as misery. Our work is not yet done. Fly over the outskirts of the city and tell me what you see there.
And once again, the prince's messenger was on the wing, this time flying in a circle throughout the farmland bordering the city. And this time, her mission took much longer, for there was much to observe. And when she returned, the sightless prince could not see the sadness in her aspect.
Little swallow, tell me what you've seen in the hinterland of the city.
There is a vast patchwork of small farms, with houses and barns in need of restoration. The houses dilapidated, barns empty of horses, cows, and chickens, plows rusted, and fields lying barren of crops. Wells run dry, children quivering from frost and weak from hunger. I could bear to see no more.
Little swallow, those barren farms were once the pride of their possessors, with heated houses, barns with stables sheltering the animals within, fertile fields with rows of crops providing sustenance for the citizens of the city. Those farmers are without means to buy seed for their harvest, and I am covered with fine gold. You must take it off, leaf by leaf, and give it to the needy.
This I cannot do.
This you must do.
I have stripped you of your splendor. I cannot deny you the warmth of your survival.
Little swallow, you must deliver the means of their survival.
Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off and delivered to the hinterland, where the farmers beamed and the faces of the children grew rosier. But as the Christmas season grew nearer, the young minister, on his nocturnal visits to the statue, could not help but be moved by the plight of the happy prince, who now stood sightless and stripped of all adornments. He did, indeed, look quite dull and gray. And then, one night, in the humble rectory of the church, Ethan Blaine sat gazing at the crackling flames of the fireplace. He thought about all he had seen and heard at the statue of the happy prince and the little swallow.
Madeline? I thought you were asleep.
I was, but something woke me, and why are you still awake?
I've been thinking about my sermon, what I was going to say to the congregation. Madeline, I want you to be there, but I also know you've been feeling poorly and...
My dear, I have never felt better or happier. That's what I wanted to tell you. To tell you what has happened, why I woke up.
What is it, Madeline?
The miracle of life. Just a few minutes ago, for the first time, I felt our baby move. Ethan, our baby. We have created a new life.
That Sunday, a curious thing happened in the city. The forlorn church, long forsaken by the citizens, had suddenly been transformed into a crowded arena, overflowing with young and old, with farmers from the hinterlands, and citizens whose footsteps seemed to be directed by an unseen guide. The age-old church bell rang out in clear and clarion summons that echoed throughout the entire city. Among those present were the young minister's wife, Madeline, Dr. Reese and his nurse, Edwina, and the owl-like teacher, Miss Fetzer, peering through her glasses. The congregation listened in rapt silence as Ethan Blaine continued with words that were in his heart.
And so, this might have been my last sermon in this city, for I, like many of you, have felt the heavy burden that has befallen us, and was about to give up hope and move on to greener pastures. But instead, during these past few days, I have been moved by the miracle of unselfishness, of self-sacrifice, that has provided the wherewithal for a new beginning, already underway. Farmers have found a new hope. All this soon will grace the province where we live and work. But there is still much work to be done. By using our skills, our faith in ourselves, and in the guardian spirit, then, once again, we will become the shining city on the hill.
The young minister paused for just a moment and smiled towards his wife.
Like an unborn baby, stirring toward the future, this spirit will see us through the cold, dark winter's crucible and into the bright spring of that shining city we are all working to build, even as the swallow builds a nest for her young.
In spite of the snow and frost, a new spirit had overtaken the citizens of the city. They were already at work on the hospital and school. Farmers were repairing their homes and barns, while children were warmed and fed, and the stables were now sheltering the animals within. And there was an abundant seed to be planted the following spring. Throughout all this, even though the poor little swallow grew colder and weaker, she could not leave the happy prince.
Little swallow, now tell me what you see.
I see the streets looking as if they are made of alabaster. Everybody going about their work in furs. Little boys and girls who wear scarlet caps, play games and skate upon the ice. Throughout the city, evergreen trees of Christmas gleam.
Early next morning, Mayor Mummer passed by the statue of the Happy Prince.
Dear me, how shabby the Happy Prince looks. How shabby indeed. He is little better than a beggar. Something must be done about this eyesore.
It was thus that a brilliant notion came to the mind of Mayor Mummer. That notion became the first order of business at the meeting that was also attended by Ethan Blaine, the young minister. The mayor was concluding a 60-minute oration to the townsfolk with an impassioned suggestion.
And I do sincerely believe that since this epic progress in the city has been achieved under my administration, it is only seemly and proper that the disgraceful statue of the Happy Prince be torn down and replaced, with unanimous approval of the council, by a larger-than-life-size statue of me.
The mayor's suggestion was unanimously rejected after the young minister made a suggestion of his own. It was just before Christmas that the little swallow knew that she was going to die. She had only enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more and whisper,
Goodbye, dear prince. Will you let me kiss you?
I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow. You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me, for I love you.
It is not Egypt that I am going. I am going to the house of death.
Death is the brother of sleep, is he not?
And the little swallow kissed the happy prince and died. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart of the happy prince had snapped right in two. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost. So it was that the statue of the happy prince was pulled down, and they melted the statue in a furnace.
What a strange thing!
Said the overseer of the workmen at the furnace.
This broken lead heart will not melt.
So they threw it on a dust heap, where the dead swallow was also lying. After a moonless night, on Christmas morning, the dawning sun rose, barely visible through a white quilt of frost and bitter winds. And yet, in spite of the unyielding depth of winter, the church was, once again, crowded with undaunted citizens, their faces gladdened, as was the face of the minister's wife, Madeline, now holding their baby in her arms. All were listening to the voice of Ethan Lane.
Today we are gathered here to celebrate the arrival of a newborn baby in a faraway stable, and the rebirth of a new spirit in our own city. This Christmas Day we look upon a place where a statue once stood. The statue is no longer there, but the spirit of the happy prince, his sacrifice, still abounds. That spirit still spurs our own endeavors as we put to work our own skills and faith in ourselves to make this, once again, the shining city on the hill. For these blessings let us pray, and then lift each voice in song for the most glorious gift of all, the gift of goodness, which is, in every measure, the greatest blessing of all.
Suddenly shone bright and warm. All eyes turned toward what had been the minister's suggestion at the town council. Above the altar, a new stained glass window, with vibrant colors of blue, green, red, and yellow, glistened in the radiance of the sun. A stained glass window with an image of the happy prince in all his adornments, and with a little swallow perched upon his shoulder. And so, the happy prince, with the little swallow on his shoulder, now look upon a shining city at Christmas and forevermore. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, this has been a special Christmas presentation of Oscar Wilde's The Happy Prince. Tune in again next week for another broadcast of the Northwoods Theater of the Air. Until then, good night and Merry Christmas.